What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back, and we're a little late here on our top 25 for this week, but not much has changed so far this week, so it's still pretty consistent. And we got a lot of teams that are getting votes, but just didn't crack it. As you can see, there's some teams that kind of fell out of the rankings as well. Since the game already happened, Ohio State, we can almost guarantee that they will be ranked next week. After the big win against Duke at home. But here, you got Xavier and LSU, who are teams that really are starting to click, except that Xavier lost last week. That kind of put them back here. LSU has been looking pretty good. And then here's all the four teams that have dropped from the rankings so far. What surprised you, Ty?
Oregon, probably. I mean, they just haven't put anything together really. Illinois, I guess you could throw them in there with Oregon, teams that I thought would be, really solid. Maybe a step behind where they were last year, but turns out they're pretty far behind where they were. Illinois, I'm not quite as surprised about as Oregon, mainly because they played Notre Dame this week, beat them somewhat easily, so they kind of got back on track. Oregon, I need to see that from them because they've been struggling.
And coming in at 25th, we got Seton Hall, who, with the win over Michigan, is pretty much their big win so far this year. And lost to Ohio State last week at the buzzer. So this team could be 6-0 and, could have a higher ranking, but they got a pretty easy schedule this week. And I expect them to move to 7-1 and continue, the Big East is wide open. So I expect them to be a top 5 team in the Big East this year for sure.
All right, Florida State struggled out of the gate, obviously with that loss to Florida where they lost pretty bad, really. But beating Missouri, good win for them, decent win. Nothing to really hang your hat on too much, but it's a 2-0 week. It's a talented team. They still have that one loss. Unfortunately, we're doing this video after that Purdue game, and they lost by 31. So that changes things a little bit. Syracuse, they can get back on track. That's a decent team they're playing. That'd be a good win. They got to show that they can compete with these ranked teams, though. They played 2 of them so far and lost badly both times.
23rd, we got our Wolverines, and yeah, they went 1-0, but there's just a lot of teams that are playing better than them right now. We were at that game, where they won by 11 against Tarleton, who just became a D1 team last year, and they struggled mightily. They can't really shoot. I mean, there's no true guard that can score on this team, and that's tough when you have Dickinson, Diabate, and Houston, who are all bigs, who need the paint down low or mid range, and if you can't get them the ball, then your team's going to struggle. So the storyline moving forward is who's going to step up and be the guy from the guard position that can really facilitate this game and get Michigan to some sort of relevance to where they were last week. But they got 2 tough games this week in San Diego State, which is a very underrated opponent this year, and at UNC tonight, which is I'm not looking forward to that game, but they're favored by I think 2.5, which really doesn't say much about UNC, surprisingly, but it's definitely gonna be a good game tonight, and hopefully they can come out victorious.
Iowa State, to me, has been the most surprising team in the country this year. There's been some other big surprises, but this team, I feel like I said this last week, they won 2 games last year, and I don't think you can emphasize that enough. And they're 6-0. We have them ranked 22. The AP poll has them ranked 19. So this team has really shown up this year. Obviously, they just beat 2 good basketball teams last week. Xavier and Memphis was a top 10 team, took care of them. So I don't know what exactly they did in the offseason. I wasn't keeping too much. I wasn't keeping track too much of what they were doing, but they did something right because they went from winning 2 games to having a 2-0 week last week against 2 good teams. So at Creighton, if they can get through that game, this is a team that is definitely top half of the Big 12 and should be able to make the tournament pretty easily after having no expectations this year.
21st, we got Michigan State, who has the deserving ranking of 21st. and big wins against Loyola and Uconn. You know, they squeaked them both out, but still really good wins to start the year. And I would say right now the best two-loss team in the country for sure. It's pretty obvious. I mean, or you could say Villanova, either or. But this week they got Louisville, which will be a really good game tonight. I believe. I believe that's on in like 30 minutes. And um, you know, whoever wins that game, I think, is going to be ranked again, like ranked probably in here because Louisville's slowly putting together a pretty good year, and that would be, I think, their biggest win this year so far, at Michigan State too. And but to Michigan State's credit this year, they're flying way under the radar just because you know everyone's talking about Purdue, Illinois, Michigan, the Big Ten, even Ohio State, and they kind of forgot about who Tom Izzo is and how good of a coach he is. And I expect them, you know, to slowly keep going up in the rankings. And you know, just that first loss at Kansas, kind of everybody already wrote Michigan State off, if we're being honest. And come March, you know, I think this team is going to be around a 5-4 seed and be a pretty scary team, just because we know how Izzo is around March.
This team has really kind of confused me in Auburn. You know, the Uconn game, that's the best game of the year so far. I mean, maybe the Indiana Syracuse game last night, but that was a crazy game. Could have went either way, so can't be too mad about that. That's a good team they lost to. Um, but this team, I thought, was going to be able to shoot the ball like they usually can. This is usually a really good three-point shooting team, athletic team, and they've had some games this year where they're just kind of, you know, struggling to get above 60 points, kind of like Michigan that we talked about. So I want to see them improve their offense. UCF that they play this week, that's no pushover. That's a pretty good team. So if they can go 2-0 this week, they'll continue to climb. But I think there's more to learn about this team. They have a few decent wins, but they don't really have that signature win yet.
19th, we got USC, who had three wins last week. I felt like they needed to go up, and we're talking about that San Diego State team, which is a very underrated team. I believe it was a close game, and USC squeaked it out. And you know, now they got Utah and Washington State, so they're starting into that Pac-12 play, conference play, you could say. And I really don't know who's going to be the best team in the Pac-12 because I thought it was UCLA at the beginning of the year. I'm pretty high on them, but then all of a sudden they played Gonzaga and got blown out by 20, and it wasn't really a game. So I expect the Pac-12 to probably be the most wide open conference of the major conferences this year, and USC to be in the front running for the title.
All right, UConn has kind of surprised me this year. I didn't think they'd be quite where they are after losing James Bouknight last year. And obviously, other than last year, this program had really been struggling for quite a few years. So it's good to see them back on track. Two good wins last week, especially that Auburn game. That was really big for them to be able to pull that out. And then the Michigan State loss, obviously, you know, that's a heartbreaking loss, lost by 2 at the end there. But they were missing one of their best players who fainted at the end of the Auburn game. So who knows if he was playing that game, maybe that goes the other way. This week already played that Maryland Eastern Shore game, a team who no one has ever heard of, and they competed with UConn. So little head scratcher there, but I think they'll be fine. I think this is a good team.
17th, we got the Wolf Pack in Arizona, and a team that, you know, we're giving them some high ranking here. The committee, you know, the 8 people, I think they're 11, and you know, I think that's a little overreaction. Their best win was Michigan at a neutral site, but you know, to their credit, they're still 6-0 and undefeated, and they got, you know, Pac-12 play starting for them too. And this is just another team that nobody was really thinking of going into the year. It was all UCLA talk, and then UCLA and Oregon, and then now you got Arizona becoming one of those front runners as well. You know, if they can get off to a 2-0 start in the Pac-12, I expect this team to stay hot and contend for the Pac-12.
All right, always the interesting team. Seems like every year, Memphis. Obviously, they have the talent like they do every year, but that Iowa State loss, I know I just went on a huge tangent about the turnaround of Iowa State, but that's still kind of a head scratching loss for Memphis. if they were going to lose one game last week, I would have thought it would have been Virginia Tech, who is a pretty good team. So that's a decent win. But again, kind of a head scratching loss to Iowa State, who is up and coming but doesn't have a ton of talent. So this week, two SEC road games. Obviously, neither of those are going to be easy games. They're kind of bottom half SEC teams, but still going on the road, never easy. So I think if this team can get through both of those games, that'll say a lot about where they're at, just because it's two tough road environments. But if they drop one of those games, those questions are still going to be coming for Memphis.
And at 15th, we got the Hoosiers of Indiana. And last night, they lost a tough one in double OT to Syracuse at the Carrier Dome. So definitely a tough place to play in. But to their credit, I don't think they're ranked in the AP poll yet. We're really high on this Indiana team just because they're in the Big Ten. And this is a team that's going to throw their hat in the ring for the Big Ten title, I would say that the Big Ten will be the most competitive for sure. Now, I wouldn't say wide open, but competitive. And you're going to have your teams that at the bottom for sure. But this Indiana team, I really don't know where we will put them. They could be a top 5 team, or they could be a bottom, or they could be a middle of the pack team as well. It's all going to come down to Trace Jackson Davis. He's been playing really good so far. But when you get in a Big Ten play going against Jaden Ivey and Diabate, all the Kofi Cockburn, all these, big names in the Big Ten, what's he going to put up? And I think that's going to be the key question heading into Big Ten play.
All right, I think Houston, despite the Wisconsin loss, just like every year, this is one of the most underrated teams in America. Obviously, the Wisconsin game dropped that one, but they just had one terrible half, and that's the only bad half of basketball they've played this season. And you saw in the second half, they just took over the game. Now, unfortunately, they were down 20 at halftime, so it wasn't enough. But they beat Butler, they beat Oregon, two good basketball teams. So I think this team is going to be here to stay. I don't really see them dropping below the top 15, top 20. I think they're going to win the American over Memphis. So this team is just like Virginia, it seems like, but they do everything a step better than them. Like they defend better, they're more athletic, and they can score better than Virginia. So I think this team will be right around top 15, maybe even top 10 all season.
13th, we got Tennessee. This is just a team that I'm just not high on, but they keep doing things that keep moving them up in the rankings, and they're 13th right now. Come SEC time, I think this team will falter a little bit, but that record may be deceiving. They haven't played too many games, 4-1. And I don't really know what to say about this Tennessee team other than I just still aren't high on them. They don't really have a signature win. I mean, you could say, who was it? Villanova, I believe they beat.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. But, North Carolina is not ranked right now, and they've kind of got off to a slow start. And, once again, it's going to come down to the SEC play and how this team can hang. If they are projected to do what they've said to do, then this team will for sure stay ranked, just like Houston, top 20 for sure for the rest of the year. But right now, we put them at 13th just because they've been playing some really good basketball.
All right, here's a team that's just kind of a head scratcher. I mean, the Iona loss. Not sure what happened there. Iona came out of that game 6-0. You thought, well, maybe Iona's just a dark horse team, and then they turn around and lose their next game to Belmont. So that's a loss that I'm not really sure what happened with Alabama. As we've seen this year and basically the last few years, this team can shoot and this team can score, but the problem is sometimes they kind of live and die by the three, and that can really hurt you sometimes. So playing Gonzaga, I think Alabama can beat Gonzaga. If they don't beat them, I think they're going to get blown out, if that makes sense. I think this kind of team that lives and dies by the three is kind of dangerous playing a team like Gonzaga, because if they get hot, they can win that game, but they're going to give up a lot of points to Gonzaga and to a lot of good teams this year. They got to get their defense figured out if they're going to be a top 10 team.
11th, we got Florida jumping up a lot because, they won the Fort Myers tip-off. And that Ohio State win right now is looking really well after they just beat Duke. And, you know, they got a tough game, I think, which is very underrated in Oklahoma, at Oklahoma, because it seems like Oklahoma has some solid teams every other year. And I think this year they might start to put it together because the Big 12 is wide open as well. And it is a high jump for them, moving up 11 spots, but there was just a lot of teams that didn't really show us a lot last week, and that kind of was just mediocre or got a loss last week. And for this Florida team being unranked at the start of the season, and now they're already 11th, really shows how much, I guess, we value this Florida team. It still is early. They got to still get in the SEC play as well, because we just had 3 SEC teams in a row. And they're all going to play each other and battle it out. But to their credit, this Florida team, I took them against Florida State, and I just kind of figured that it seems like Florida, has a good team every now and then. And here they are. This is that good team. And I expect them to keep playing how they do. And I honestly think that they are one of the favorites to win the SEC as of right now.
Well, speaking of the SEC, we start the top 10 with Kentucky, who, it's hard to say a whole lot about them right now. They lost to Duke their first game, and since then they've had 5 basically cupcake games outside of a decent Ohio team. And then obviously 2 more of those this week. So Kentucky's schedule usually picks up in December. That's no exception this year when they start, playing those solid out of conference teams. But it's hard to say too much about them right now. That Duke loss, obviously looks a little better now after they moved up to number 1, even losing this week. But Kentucky is going to be a good team. I'm struggling to find things to say though. They've won 5 easy games in a row, so good job.
And you can kind of say the same here about Texas. Chris Beard's doing a decent job. 4-1 start, and nothing really to write home to mom about this Texas Longhorns team. They've slowly just kind of been going through the motions, and we haven't really, nobody's really been talking about Texas on the news, in the talk shows, nothing, because, they really haven't showed us anything that there is to talk about. Chris Beard's teams, defensive teams, and that's why no one's talking about them, because they're good on defense. But scoring could be an issue going forward, and when they get good scoring teams playing against them, it's going to be the huge question going into Big 12 is, can they keep up? And I guess we're going to have to find out in the next upcoming weeks.
Well, this team, Villanova, ranked number 8, they are the opposite of Kentucky. They have just loaded their schedule, obviously, losing 2 tough games to Purdue and UCLA, but they have the win over Tennessee, I think it was. Yeah, Tennessee. So this team has played probably the toughest schedule in America through 6 games. And despite losing 2 of those games, I thought the UCLA game, they looked like the better team basically the whole game, lost that game in overtime on the road. The Purdue game, they looked like the better team for 30 minutes. And then obviously the Purdue train that they've been this year whipped through them. But Villanova's main issue and why they're not 6-0 is they only play 6 or 7 guys. So their team's getting tired at the end of games. That's why they've blown 2 leads already. So they got to find a little more depth to try and go at least 8 or 9 deep in their lineup, or they could lose some leads late. And that's dangerous come March if you only have a short rotation.
7th, we got Arkansas, and just another SEC team sent. And I think we got 5 in the last 10 rankings, I believe. And pretty solid win. I guess you could say that Cincinnati team is could be a sleeper team come March. And that's a good win for them. And same with Kansas State win. That's a good win. And this week they got 2 easy games. And I expect this, Arkansas team possibly to reach the top 5 next week if a team falters. At 8-0 to start the year and leading the SEC, that's always a good thing going into conference play.
All right, Kansas was my sleeper really to win the whole thing, going into last week. And then they lose to Dayton, which, head scratcher. Some people watching this video might get mad at me, but that's a pretty bad loss. No easy way to put that. Kansas was, I thought, at least a top three team going into last week. Now 6 almost seems too high, but they have the talent to be right up there. So we're just going to chalk that up as a bad day at the office for Kansas. I think going forward, they're going to be fine. St. John's on the road this week. That's a pretty good team. That's a tough game. But if they get through that, I think they'll be right back on track. And I don't think that Dayton loss is going to really show anything about how they'll perform the rest of the season.
And, based off that Dayton loss, they got super lucky with that bounce at the end. Like, realistically, basketball is a game of, just a game of calls and what luck they got that day. And unfortunately, Dayton down the stretch, had that. They had the momentum and everything. And, this Kansas team could be even in the top 3 right now if they, that ball doesn't fall in. But still a really good Kansas team moving forward. And UCLA, you got some question marks around your team. You got things to work on after that 20-point loss to Gonzaga. But they responded well with 2 wins this week, and they're going into Pac-12 play. And, if they can get 2 more wins this week, I expect UCLA to kind of just chalk it up as a fluke game against Gonzaga. And still, this is my team that I think can win it all this year in the Pac-12, where there's lots of just pretty much question marks throughout the whole Pac-12 of a lot of teams. And had to drop them a little bit just to show Gonzaga, that they are Gonzaga still. And I don't know. I mean, it's really just going to come down to is if all their stars can play at the top level like they did in their run last year. And if they can, I expect this team to be somewhat near close finish as they had last year.
All right, coming in at number 4, we got the defending champions who are really not missing a beat this year. 2 pretty dominant wins in Atlantis, and then 1, kind of close call against VCU. But other than that, this team has looked like every bit of a defending national champion. And there were definitely some question marks in my mind going into this season. Did they lose too much from that team last year? But it appears they didn't. It appears they're ready to make another run for a Big 12 championship, potentially another national championship. So going forward, I think you got to watch out for Baylor, and you got to think of them just as highly as you did last year, despite everything they lost.
Coming in at 3rd, we got Gonzaga, and that loss to Duke last week was a really great game. But unfortunately, they couldn't pull it out, and they won't go undefeated. It feels like in the regular season for the first time in 5-6 years. And to their credit, though, they have one of the toughest schedules in all of college basketball. And you can see it on the schedule this week. They got Alabama again, another ranked team this year. And, right now after that Duke loss, who knows, they might be moving ahead of Duke again. It really depends on how Duke can respond. And Gonzaga, to their credit, Chet Holmgren has been even better, I think, that people can even imagine. And it's going to be a tough test, though, when he starts to face all the big dogs. And if he has to match up with Cockburn, it's going to be interesting to see how he can hang, especially even in Purdue and Zach Edey. Battle of the 7-footers and who's going to come out on top. Definitely some matchups I'd love to see come March, but I don't really see any concern here with this Gonzaga team, and I expect them to be along the 1-2 seed line for the whole year.
All right, at number 2, we got Duke, and thankfully we didn't put them at 1 before they lost last night to Ohio State, but definitely deserved number 2. I think even with the loss, you could still argue that they should still be right there at number 2, beating Gonzaga and beating Kentucky. So right there, you got 2 top 10 wins. I believe they're the only team in the country that has that. So this team, I definitely was unsure of their number 9 ranking to start the season, but clearly they deserved it and probably deserved to be higher. They beat Kentucky, looked like the better team that whole game. Gonzaga, Obviously, that one came right down to the wire, but that's a huge win for them. So I think even losing this game on the road, they could have had a little bit of a letdown coming off beating the number one team, and it's hard to blame them if that's the case. So I think this team's going to be really good going forward. I think they're by far the best team in the ACC right now. So I think this team could easily win at least 25 games this regular season.
And at number 1, we have Grayson Plu's school and his team. So he's going to be tuning in and he's going to be very happy about us putting Purdue at 1. And if you just look at last night's game against Florida State, they deserve it. I mean, 31-point win against an ACC team that, we have ranked right now. And they got Iowa on Friday, which is going to be a very good game. Both teams will be, I believe it's official. I don't think Iowa has another game, but I believe they'll both be 7-0 at the time meeting, and someone's got to lose. I think it won't be Purdue though, at home.
It'll be Iowa.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be Iowa. But, to their credit, this Purdue team has been better than everyone thought, especially with Zach Edey playing out of his mind. Same with Travion Williams. And then you obviously can't forget about Jaden Ivey, who's been an absolute stud for the Boilermakers. And, going forward, Purdue is definitely the team to beat, not only in the Big Ten, but right now in the country. And I'd say right now they are the favorites to win March Madness, just because they've been the most consistent and they have so many weapons. They can choose pretty much how they want to beat you. But that'll be it for our video tonight. So we'll try to get our rankings out next week a lot sooner. We've just been busy this week. But make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, as we'll be doing more videos like this and some new content coming soon. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.